Thanks. So this morning's reading is from Galatians chapter 6 and verses 1 to 10. So Galatians 6, and we're starting at verse 1. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. Nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructor. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers.
Well, hello. I don't know why I'm surprised that a microphone makes a loud noise, but for some reason I am. It's nice to see you. My name is Andy, and I'm part of the team here at P's and G's. If you're here for the first time, just echo Dave's welcome. We're really glad that you're here. And as he said, you've come in at the tail end of a letter that we've been reading that's in the New Testament, which is a letter that Paul, who's someone who started a bunch of churches after he met Jesus for himself, wrote to one of those churches. It's really kind of like an outpouring of his heart for them. How he wants them to understand Jesus, things that they've forgotten that he wants to remind them of, and then things that he wants to kind of cheer them on in and call them into. As a family, we just went away in half term. I have family that live in Egypt, so we actually went out to Egypt together to visit them. It's the first time we've been there. And if you've never been before, it's really worth it. If you ever get the chance, we wandered around, ate phenomenal food, and kind of went to some incredible once-in-a-lifetime monuments where my kids lay on the floor and kind of like rolled around and threw tantrums, not appreciating the fact that that was a 5,000-year-old building that they were doing that in. We basically, there's just so much to see. It can be a little bit overwhelming, and you can go from one building to another ruin, to a little museum, to another ancient monument, all of which are thousands and thousands of years old, and not appreciate any of it. And as I was reading this passage to prepare for it, I just thought, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm back in old Cairo. There's like one verse after another verse after another verse, and every single one really is a whole talk. At least. And you could spend hours just contemplating some of what Paul is saying at the start. And we can't cover it all. So what we're going to do instead is we're just going to walk into one side room. We're going to sit down and we're going to appreciate what happened in this space and what this space says to us. So the bit that we're going to focus on from the passage, and I know I hate doing it because I know I'm leaving loads of great stuff out, but the bit we'll focus on is the bit towards the end. So Galatians chapter 6. I'll just read you the last little bit of what we had read. Starting verse 7. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. So what Paul is doing is he's using a picture from farming, from agriculture, an area about which I know absolutely nothing. And he is saying something that is, even for me, is obvious, which is he says, whatever you sow, you reap. So there's that verse, a man reaps what he sows. The same is true, by the way, if you are a woman. Whatever we put into the ground, if it's a carrot seed, or if it's a strawberry seed, or if it's tomato seeds, that is what we reap. And he's taking that universal principle from the law of nature, and what he's essentially saying is that there is a moral principle that is equally the case, that whatever we sow in terms of our behavior and our actions, those are the things that we end up reaping. And so that is the thing for us just to ponder, because as we contemplate this, and as we consider it and what Paul is saying to us, it has huge implications for how we choose to live. So he's effectively saying there are two ways in which you can sow. Another way of putting that is there are two ways, two paths that you can choose to go down as you choose to live your life. Way number one is what he talks about when he says, whoever sows to please their flesh, from their flesh will reap destruction. So way number one is essentially to please ourselves. It is to live for ourselves as opposed to living for God. The do as you please life. And what Paul is saying is that whenever we put ourselves as number one in our lives, whenever we make our decisions based on how we feel in a particular moment when we are at the center, everything around us begins to orbit around us. So our relationships have to work for our benefit. They become really a means to an end, and the end is our own self-worth or self-gratification. Our career becomes about us, our reputation, and our success, and our security. When we seek money, and we make that the object of what we're chasing, then what happens is that becomes a thing that our lives get focused on, and the consequences of that, if I spend a life sowing to the selfish part of who I am, then inevitably, maybe not at the start, but inevitably, I will reap from this word destruction. And the word there could also be translated, things would disintegrate or they would fall apart. So essentially, if I sow dishonesty and selfishness, my relationships will inevitably be blighted by that. If I seek out money, and either I don't get it and my world therefore crumbles, or I do get it and I discover it's not all it's cracked up to be, then my self-worth is affected by that. And there's a little saying that I think has got a lot of credit to it. Sow a thought, reap an act. Sow an act, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. The headline is, when we live for ourselves, instead of becoming more whole as we go through life, we become more fragmented and we become more broken. So, put another way, it is not a great idea. And we end up in destruction. That is a warning for us all. Happy Sunday. The second way to live is to live for God. And so what Paul says is, sow to please the Spirit. And just the fact that he puts the words to please in there, I think is really, really an interesting one. So when we step back and we look at the bigger picture of Galatians, what we're told, and this is the message of Christianity, and for me, when I came to understand it for myself quite a while ago now, although I'm perpetually relearning it, it just floored me. This is all a gift. Jesus comes to us as a free gift, and he holds out his hand to us. And to any of us who say yes, who decide we're going to put our trust in him, then he grabs our hands and, as it were, flings us into this dance of joy and this dance of life, where we receive in him goodness and kindness and compassion, where the doors of heaven are flung open and we are welcomed not just into the outer porch, but right into the heart, where we're encouraged to rest and to sit and to relax in the goodness and the love of God, where we get to finally stop striving for worth and accept that the worth comes from the one who loves us enough to die for us. That's the invitation. In other words, Jesus sowed a particular life in the ground, his own. And from that life, all of us who say yes to him reap eternal life. That's the message of Galatians. It is an unashamed message of grace. At the same time, what Paul is saying here is that though that is true, He wants us to understand really strongly, and that's why he says, do not be deceived, because the Galatians have been deceived. He says, do not be deceived. What a person reaps, they will sow. So think about it like this. I got married 15 years ago to my wife, Beth, and at that moment, we kind of gave ourselves to each other. We stood before a whole church, and we made vows where we say, everything that I have, I give to you. I promised Beth the contents of my entire bank account. She knew what was in it, so she wasn't jumping for joy at that particular moment. But I promised her everything, and similarly, she did for me. And we have now been married 15 years. There's that moment of the relationship beginning. But then, what I have found out over the 15 years of marriage is that how I choose to live in the light of Beth giving herself to me has consequences for my life. We just on Friday, we decided we'd go for a little walk on Cramond Island. I don't know how many of you have done that, but we dropped our kids off at school. We thought, let's go to Cramond Island for a wander. Tide's out. Went and wandered around Cramond Island. Oh my goodness, Scotland is beautiful. Isn't this incredible? We should probably go and pick up the kids now. Let's walk back around to the front of the island. And of course, the tide had come in. Not all the way, but the path. Do you know the path? The path was underwater. So we looked at each other and we were like, oh my goodness, how did that happen? So we started to wade. We fortunately had wellies on, but we started to wade through the path. And we have very different responses to a crisis like that. So Beth, who I love with my whole heart, panicked. And I thought it was funny. So we're walking along, wading through the water, and Beth starts yelling at me, it's coming in, what are we going to do? And I said, don't worry, we've got loads of time, we've got plenty of time, we're fine, it's only up to here. I could see the land, it's just over there. And as we went further, I realized, oh my goodness, this is further than it looks. I started to get my phone out and film Beth as she panicked. And I could show you the video if you want to, I'm not going to, but afterwards. But things started to disintegrate from there. And basically, what I learned through that experience, we made it for those, we're absolutely soaking up to our waists by the time we got back, but we managed to make it back and then go and pick up our children. But what I realized is, okay, so if I film Beth while she's panicking during a crisis, what I sow into my future is destruction. And I guess the principle applies as we follow God, right? He has given himself to you, but what we choose to do and how we choose to act dictates our future. It dictates our character, but also it dictates the future of those around us. This applies on two levels, for us personally, but also for the impact that we're going to have on the world around us. So what he says, therefore, is this is what you need to do. So to please the Spirit. And it's such a general phrase, it's hard to work out what does that actually mean. And later on he says, do good to everybody, which again is pretty general as things go. Do good to everybody. But in a sense, it's so beautifully general that we probably can all take that and apply that to our lives. Today, I have opportunities to do good. As a parent, I have opportunities to do good as a spouse, as a friend, as somebody who cares for my elderly relatives. Today, I have opportunities to do good as I walk past people in the street who are in need. As I go into the week ahead of me, I have opportunities to do good in my vocation, whatever that happens to be for you. There are chances abounding this week, and the heart of Christianity is to do good. For all the programs and all the other things we can sometimes turn it into, it's to love in a very concrete, very practical, very tangible way. I have the chance to do good. And as I do that, what I do is I sow into my future the quality of eternity. And that's a huge thing to say, because what we can end up believing is, as we watch the news and we see the world leaders, or as we go on social media and we see the influencers, or as we look around in our own little circles and we see the heavy hitters, the people that are really making it, we can end up, in the light of that, comparing ourselves to them and dismissing what we can do or what we might achieve. And this is where I want to focus in on that part of we can make an impact for Jesus and his kingdom. Because what Paul says is, as we sow, we will reap. So it's not just the principle that what you sow, you reap, but as you sow, you will reap. So this is where we have verse 9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest. And I think that verse for me is so profound because what it suggests is we are going to become tired sometimes. As we seek to please God and not please ourselves, we are going to find ourselves second-guessing that. We're going to find ourselves in moments of confusion. We're going to find ourselves thinking this is harder than I expected it to be. We're going to find ourselves being discouraged. And and I don't know your story, but it may well be there have been choices you've had to make as you follow God that have been incredibly difficult. Maybe you've chosen to do something as a career that your family disapprove of or that they disagree with. Perhaps because of what God has said to you, you've chosen a career that means you're not as well off as you would have been if you'd gone down a different track. Perhaps the choices you've made have meant you've had to face your own fears and be out of your comfort zone in ways you'd rather not have been. Perhaps you've had to confront your own fears and your own doubts along the way. Perhaps you decided, I'm going to be a teacher and I'm going to change the school. I'm going to raise up a new generation. And you're kind of like halfway down the tracks now, and it feels like pretty discouraging. Gosh, I thought we would be further than this. Perhaps you went into government thinking, I'm going to make a difference in this sphere. And again, it feels like it's got worse since you arrived, rather than got better. And so we hit these barriers and these moments where it feels like, oh my goodness, I'm not sure I can keep going. It's been such a grind. It's been so long. And if you've ever run like a cross-country race or that kind of stuff, there are moments when I've done those things where I've felt like I've given everything I've got, and I've realized I've only gone this far, and I've got so much more to go. And those moments can demoralize us to the point where the strength drains from us, that the courage drains from us, and we struggle to know how to keep going. And I picture Paul in a moment like this with the church in Galatia and with P's and G's here in Edinburgh. And he's by the side of the road as we're trudging along, trying to keep going. And he has a massive banner on. And on the banner, he says, keep going. You're not finished yet. You will get there and you will reap a harvest. The way he might put it today is, it will be worth it. And what he might say, if we've got a moment or two before we keep running, is a couple of things. One is this: it was never going to be quick. And we're living in a culture that just cherishes everything being instant. That's just how it goes. So it's next day delivery, same day delivery. No one's interested in a get rich slow scheme when you can have a get rich quick scheme, right? When we're trying to lose weight, we want rapid weight loss. When we listen to people's stories, we want stories of instant success because we think maybe I could have a similarly meteoric rise to the heights, whatever it is that I'm ending. So what that does is when we're immersed in a culture like that, it schools us, almost without us realizing that it's doing it, into this sort of set of expectations of same-day reaping and harvesting. That I sow today and I reap today, or at the worst, tomorrow. But what happens with farming is that we sow in one season and we reap in a different one. We always reap in a different season from the one that we sow in. And God's timing, have you ever felt this in your own life? I mean, I see it in the Bible. God's timing is frustrating. It's so not our timing. Noah's told it's going to rain. I think it's like 120 years before it rains. Abraham said, you're going to have a kid, Abraham. It's going to be amazing. It's 25 years before Isaac is born, and Abraham is 75 years old when he's told that. Moses, hey Moses, Moses basically gets off into the desert to be prepared for what he's going to do with Israel. He's 40 years in the desert, and that's followed by another 40 years in the desert with the people of Israel. The Bible is a book of fulfillment. God comes through on every single promise. It's also a book of waiting. The whole of the Old Testament are people waiting for God to fulfill the promise that he gave them. The New Testament, which is us, by the way, we're waiting for God to fulfill everything that he's told us he's going to do. And the hardest type of waiting is the waiting when we are in a hurry and God is not. And in those moments, it's remembering, wait a minute, God's timing is always perfect. He knows what he's doing. He never said it was going to be quick. In fact, so often he tells us the opposite. And what he encourages us to do, if we haven't seen the results yet, is not call it a day and walk away, but to keep planting good seeds. So Paul might say to us, it was never going to be quick. And do you know the other thing I think he would probably say to us? It was always going to be worth it. I think he would say to us, hey, don't look back, because you're not going that way. What I want you to do is double down and keep looking forward. You know those dreams you had? They were from me. They were from the Lord. So you're going to quit and walk away now because it got hard? You're going to call it a day now when you're halfway there? You've no idea what is around the corner. And in so many spheres of life this applies. I remember hearing Rob Parsons. I don't know if you've ever heard him speak, but he started something called Care for the Family. And, that's one great example of where it's like just a constant sowing. If you're a parent and you've got kids, nobody expects a baby to come out and start doing the washing up. Nobody expects a teenager to come downstairs and start doing the washing up. Maybe when they're in their 30s, we might get there, right? But it's like, it's not going to happen yesterday. It's probably not going to happen tomorrow. But if I keep sowing and if I keep planting and if I keep going. Anyway, he's telling the story of a parent who wrote to him one day. And she said, look, we raised our child to know Jesus and she wandered away. There were some significant things that happened in her life. But then when she hit her teenage years, she just drifted. And in the end, the breakdown in the family relationship was so bad that the girl effectively cut off all contact with them. And she said, every Christmas, this is the mother writing, every Christmas, what I would do is I would put the Christmas lights on the tree in the front yard because she always used to like that. And I would always leave the porch light on and I would put Christmas lights just outside. And I chose to do that hoping that she might drive past and see it. And then what happened is, after years and years and years, this young woman, she finally had something going on in her life, I don't know what, but she came to the Lord for herself, and she was reconciled to her parents. And what she said to her parents was this: she used to, at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, at Christmas time, drive around to where she knew her parents lived, and she would sit in the car outside in the street, and she would look at the lights. And she said, I always knew that you kept the light on for me. And what Rob Parsons says is, always keep the light on. So what does it look like to not become weary in doing good? What it looks like is to just choose today, just for today, I'm going to respond in kindness. I'm going to give away. I'm going to not please myself and what my base instincts want me to do, but Lord, I'm going to please you because this is how you want me to live. And I'm going to do it tomorrow. And then I'm going to do it tomorrow. And when we feel like we've got nothing left, when you feel like you're spent, and it's like, I've spent all the good seed, I ain't got no seed left. Remember this, it begins in grace, it continues in grace, and it finishes with grace. And so the difference between this truth that we get from Galatians and some kind of self-help message you can get on YouTube is that the message of this is not dig deep, grit your teeth, and keep on going. It's not find inner strength deep down inside yourself. It's remember this: he gave his life as a seed fallen into the earth, rose again from the dead, sits at the right hand of the Father, looks at us and is already pleased and says, now choose to live like this. And as you do, in your weakness, in your confusion, even through your tears as you choose to continue to sow, what you will find is a harvest comes, and you do it, here's the key, not in your own strength, but in mine. You do it in the strength that I have and in the grace that I give you. And so come to me and say, my hands are empty, I've got no seed. And what you'll find is I pour into your lap reserves. Do you know for how long? Single day. Enough to plant a few more seeds. And then you begin again tomorrow. And what we'll find as we look back in the years ahead is that no, it was not quick, but my goodness, it was worth it. Amen.